This episode is brought to you by DistroKid. DistroKid is the easiest way for musicians to get their music into all the platforms: Amazon, Apple, Tidal, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and more. Plus, you've got unlimited uploads, and the artist keeps 100% of what they make. But what I love most about DistroKid is their app. The design of it just makes the whole process so easy. Now you can be sure that you're doing everything you need to do to get your music out there. Go to distrokid.com to check it out or download the app now. The dynamic duo known as the Holy Brothers, Marvin Etzioni and OG Discograffiti Soldier of Sound Willie Aaron, have a new album out called High in My Balloon. This remarkable album is the triumphant result of the two friends turning to music for comfort and strength after Marvin's bout with leukemia and Willie was forced to deal with the loss of his wife of 25 years to cancer. Americana Highways described it as like Brian Wilson snuck into the studio, fired up the machines, and did some work on some of the tracks not locked up. Really, the harmonies, basic tracks, songwriting, and lots of other odds and ends are that momentous. If you love the harmonies and sonic experimentation of Bookends era Simon and Garfunkel, the Beach Boys, and Beck's Circus Sea Change, you owe it to yourself to dig into the musical wonders of High in My Balloon by the Holy Brothers, available right now on Regional Records. The second single from Future Prophet Records is here. Birthday Girl presents Never the Sound, available right now on Future Prophet Records. That's Future, Prophet, records.com. Order now.
The technological stuff came true. You know, like I have this little recorder just sitting in my living room now, and it's an 18-track digital recorder. And I don't know how many tracks I can stack up on my sequencer, but I think 20 or 30 tracks at least in sync on my sequencer, and then bring them over and lay them onto this little recorder, which is more than a 16-track recorder. Bigger than anything Brian ever dreamed of recording on. And it just sits in there by my piano in case I want to do a demo. And it's got virtual rooms, it's got all kinds of echo, everything you can imagine on it, and things that he couldn't have imagined. And so all of the technical aspect of this came true like gangbusters. The dream of having a 48-track recorder on a quarter-inch tape was nothing compared to this.
Right.
We're not even using tape. But what causes some concern in retrospect is that we don't seem to know what to do with all this technology. The ideas are not there.
Welcome to another episode of Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series and Your Dreams Come True, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of over 50 top-shelf guests ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and special thanks goes out to co-producers Chuck Granata, Dennis Dyken, and Mark Freed, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, along with our special guest, Jimmy Webb. In this episode, we feature the next entry in the Chuck Granata Pet Sounds interview series. It's Chuck's chat with legendary songwriter-singer Jimmy Webb. This beautiful little interview serves as the perfect palate cleanser before Discograffiti launches into our unprecedented 21-episode love series, which kicks off next week. Winning the Grammy Award for Song of the Year at the age of 21, Webb has written multiple platinum-selling songs, including Up, Up, and Away, By the Time I Get to Phoenix, MacArthur Park, Wichita Lineman, Worst That Could Happen, Galveston, and All I Know. He had successful collaborations with Glen Campbell, Linda Ronstadt, The Fifth Dimension, country supergroup The Highwaymen, The Supremes, Art Garfunkel, Richard Harris, and Carly Simon. He's the only artist ever to receive Grammy Awards for music, lyrics, and orchestration. Here's just a few of the many things that Jimmy discusses with Discograffiti in this podcast. What George Martin had told Jimmy about Pet Sounds, the importance of multi-track recording for works like Pet Sounds to even exist, Magic Alex and the freeing possibilities of recording potential during the 1960s, which we now take for granted, Jimmy's favorite song off Pet Sounds, and the fascinating story about Jimmy's prospective project with Frank Sinatra, which unfortunately never got off the ground. Coming up, we've got incredible deep dive series on Love, Jefferson Airplane, and a hell of a lot more, so don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. For over 4 years now, Discograffiti's Friday episodes have been completely free, and it's been my pleasure. But for a variety of reasons, Discograffiti's now moved to the subscription-based Patreon as our primary platform. Moving forward, our public stream will feature a teaser of the Friday episode and a Tuesday teaser of the bonus episode, and that's all. But here's the good news. Only $5 a month will get you the weekly Friday podcast to which you become accustomed. That's it. It's a no-brainer at just $1 an episode. And just that little bit will be what's required to help the show survive. To sweeten the pot, you'll also get regular installments of the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's Rudy Fishman's podcast within a podcast featuring our Patreon members as guests. You'll also get access to over 100 back episodes of that show. The $10 Lieutenant tier gets you all that, plus access to half of the Patreon archive. That's hundreds of additional episodes, plus copies of my personal show notes, which include invaluable research, star ratings, and reviews. But the $20 major tier is the place to be, unless you can support the show on even higher tiers, which, if you can afford it, offers substantial perks, including advertising on the show and selecting the guests and artists I cover. With the major tier and above, you get it all. The Monday bonus episodes, aka the best stuff, the Friday show, the Soldiers of Sound podcast, plus access to the entire archive. That's many hundreds of Patreon episodes, an absolutely endless barrage of music entertainment, including 50 episodes of The Private Press with Paul Major, Rock Cousteau, Queasy Listening, and so much more. So support the podcast that's been supporting you for years. Discograffiti's calling, and it needs you, so don't risk feeling guilty by not giving. But enough of me yapping. Go on, subscribe now. Visit patreon.com/discograffiti and find the tier that's right for you. And away we go then!
What can I do for you?
Well, I'm writing this book on the making of Pet Sounds, and I guess you had spoken to Kingsley Abbott, correct?
Yeah, I did. I'm sort of at the end of my rope here with the Brian Wilson thing, but I'd be glad to answer a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's just that I actually, the reason I really wanted to talk to you is because Michael Feinstein had really thought it would be a good idea. And, my focus is totally different than Kingsley's. I wrote a Sinatra book. I'm a friend of Nancy's, and I'm a Sinatra producer. I do all the Sinatra reissues at Columbia Records, and I really kind of interwove a lot of technical stuff in, like the recording history and so forth. So I'm trying to do the same here.
Okay, well, ask me what you'd like to ask me, and I'll answer you as well as I can. I should warn you that I had nothing to do with Pet Sounds at all.
And I know that.
I wasn't there. All I can say is I loved the record, basically, and that it had a lot of influence on me, everybody else too. But I really didn't see any of those sessions.
Right, I realize that. What's fascinating to me is that, I don't think there's any better analysis, if you want to call it that, of a work like this that's so revered. I guess the perspective of a songwriter and musician probably, is better than anyone else's. And I guess that's why, I thought that your voice would be important, So I guess, what were you hearing as a songwriter and as a musician at that point? Like, what really turned you on to this? Was it something, in the chordal structure of what Brian was doing?
Well, I was working with a really fine choral director. I was going to San Bernardino Valley College. I was majoring in music. I only lasted a couple of years there, but I had a great choral instructor named Otto Mielens, and we were doing a lot of J.S. Bach, and other things, but we did a lot of J.S. Bach, and we were also analyzing Bach chorales in my harmony and musicianship classes, which is parentheses theory. So I was very tuned into that. There was also a very hot group out in those days called the Swingle Singers, who did kind of, hard to explain really, but like jazz trio versions of J.S. Bach pieces, but all done vocally with syllables like da-ba, 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 da-ba. You probably heard.
Oh, sure. I have some of their albums. They're great.
All syllable singing. And so my ears were tuned to that. I was really so much the Johann Sebastian Bach fan that the first thing I picked up on in the Brian Wilson work was the kind of chorale quality to some of the early things, like even like Surfer Girl and stuff like that, reminded me of some of the chorale music. And then later, of course, when he got into Pet Sounds, he got very contrapuntal, and he was doing stuff that was very evocative of classical music. To be honest with you, that's what piqued my interest, because that's where I was coming from. That's where I thought I was going in a way. And I think that I fell under the spell of that along with a lot of other people. I know that when I talked to George Martin, who contributed a lot, he produced an album with me called El Mirage. And I got to know him pretty well. I like to think of him as a close friend. And he said to me in so many words, well, the exact quote was, Sgt. Pepper was an attempt to equal Pet Sounds. That was a quote. And he's a very charming character with beautiful kind of RAF blue eyes and that British, very dry British wit. And when he said it, he underlined the word attempt. He said it was an attempt to equal Pet Sounds. So those were the kind of confidences that we used to share. And he was telling me in a way that they may not have felt that they equaled it, but they certainly tried to. So there's a kind of direct pollination. Brian Wilson, Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, and then you have this wide dissemination of these classical ideas then you have Tommy and you have so-and-so. You have all sorts of permutations all at once. Right. You have Jimmy Webb, and you have all these things that smell of classical music in a kind of direct line from Pet Sounds. I mean, there's no question about it.
I'm making that point because I interviewed at length Ross Barber of the Four Freshmen. Uh-huh. Because, so many people speak of the influence of the Four Freshmen on Brian's, vocal work, right, but no one ever really explained what it was. So I went to Ross early on, and we talked about this. We talked about the classical influence, and we talked about how that early harmonic structure of classical music led into a lot of other later things, and then into barbershop and so forth. So right, I think those influences are very clear myself.
Well, I think that the chorale, if you listen to something like Don't Talk, you get a very clear picture of almost impression of air in G, the very famous Bach air that sort of is so reminiscent of a lot of his liturgical music. So there's a real hymn-like quality to that particular thing. And then in God Only Knows, there's a very, almost an overt bow to the Baroque music. And again, a choral. It's the feeling of a choir. So I think that I have no way of knowing this for certain, but I just feel that Brian was under the spell of a lot of different vocal sound.
All right, that about does it. To hear the full episode, just visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and either subscribe as a private or higher, or just purchase it as a one-off. If you are a fan of the show, please do one of those two to help ensure Discograffiti's continued existence. Stay tuned, because next week brings upon us the first episode of our massive new series on the band Love, which features the red carpet return of podcast OG Joe Joe Kennedy, Love OG Johnny Eccles, and the members of Baby Lemonade, who have served as the long-reigning, long-suffering members of Love for over 30 years. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then, come Tuesday, the major tier gets a very special treat. Tuesday's bonus episode is part 9 of our Spirit series, the very final episode, covering Randy California's creatively listless final years, which produced a handful of problematic records with terrific cherry-picking moments before he tragically lost his life. There will be a very short sneak peek running publicly for free on Tuesday morning, but the entirety of the show will only be accessible on the major tier of our Patreon. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Jimmy Webb, Chuck Granata, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, and access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the classic rock and roll from the 1960s is to go to the Beach Boys Season 1, Catch a Wave, 1961 to 1964, from episode 189 on, the Righteous Brothers Bill Medley interview, that's 181 and 182, my interview with the Free Design, that's 160 to 162, my epic interview with the Mamas and Papas Michelle Phillips, that's 141 to 159, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, that's 137, my 12-hour interview with Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from The Association, that's 109 to 113, Vashti Bunyan reading her entire output, that's 103 to 104, Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes, that's 86 and 87, Bert Summer, that's 83 and 84, Sweetwater is episode 79, a tribute to David Crosby, 77 and 78, Andrew Tuttle rates the Monks, 74, Jim Florentine on Black Sabbath is 64 to 68, Lou Barlow on the Zombies is 59 and 60, Marvin Gaye biographer David Ritz rates Marvin Gaye, that's 45 to 47. Blind Faith is 43. Anthony Fantano rates the Velvet Underground is 32 and 33. Bob Forrest rates the band is 25 and 27. Monkees manager Andrew Sandoval rates the Monkees, that's 22 and 23. Don Randy rates David Axelrod is 17. Badfinger is 16. The Bee Gees is 10 and 11. Sly and the Family Stone is 5, 6, and 7. And Pink Floyd is 1 and 2. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, March 13th, we're coming at you with the launch of our ludicrously epic new series on one of the greatest bands of all time, the phenomenal Love, as we finally demystify one of the most mystifying bands ever to wend their way through the music industry. It's Discograffiti's brand new, unprecedentedly epic, myth-dismantling 21-episode Love series. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!